Podcasting has become a powerful medium for storytelling, education, and entertainment. And it's a platform that allows creators to connect with audiences on a personal level. But how do you ensure that your podcast reaches the ears of those who would appreciate it? And how do you grow your audience and promote your podcast effectively? Hello and welcome to another episode of Digital Marketing Made Simple. I'm your host, Jenny Lyon, and today I'm excited to jump into the ultimate podcast marketing playbook and dig into some strategies to set your podcast up for success. Let's get into it. So, podcast marketing is really this multifaceted process. It involves a range of strategies and tactics that are designed to promote your podcast and grow your audience. And at its core, podcast marketing is about connecting with your listeners. It's about understanding their needs, their interests, and their desires, and delivering content that resonates with them. But it's also about standing out in a really crowded podcast landscape. With millions of podcasts available, how do you make yours unique? How do you make it the one that listeners choose to tune into? And what is your podcast's unique value proposition? Where does that come in? And also, it's about understanding your target audience. That really is key. So first up, let's chat a little bit about defining your podcast's unique value proposition. So your podcast's UVP is what sets it apart from the rest. It could be that unique value that your podcast offers to its listeners, such as insights that you provide. It could also be unique guests that you bring on, or it could be the unique way that only you can tell stories or discuss certain topics. When you define your UVP, it's really critical in that first step as your overall marketing strategy. You really want to understand what makes your podcast special, and it helps you communicate that uniqueness with your potential listeners. But remember, your UVP, it's not just about being different. It's about being different in a way that matters to your listeners. It's really about offering something that they value and that they can't get it anywhere else. Next up is to really dial in and identify your target audience. That is really a critical step when it comes to marketing your podcast. So your target audience is that group of people who are going to be the most likely to be interested in your podcast. You really do need to understand that target audience because it helps you to create content that resonates with them. And you really need to understand their needs, their interests, and their preferences. That way you can tailor your marketing efforts to reach them in a more effective way. So your target audience can be defined by a ton of different factors, right? That usually includes their age, their demographics, location, interests, that type of thing. But the more that you know about your target audience, the more effectively you can reach them and engage them with your podcast. But remember, trying to appeal to everyone is appealing to no one, right? I say that over and over again because it is so important. So focus on understanding and serving your exact target audience. That is really the key to growing your podcast audience and achieving that overall success that you're looking for when marketing your podcast. Next up is to craft quality content. So quality content is really going to be the cornerstone of any successful podcast. It's what keeps your listeners coming back week after week or month after month for more. And it's really what makes them recommend your podcast to other people. But what does quality content look like in the context of a podcast? So it's content that's engaging, informative, educational, overall valuable to your listeners. And it's content that resonates with them and meets them where they're at today and gives them something, right? So in a podcast like mine, where it's focused on marketing, I really want my listeners to walk away not only learning something, but something valuable that they can put into play in their own business today that will give them a quick win and move them closer and closer to their goals. And quality content is also content that is well produced. So we're looking for clear audio, good sound mixing, and professional editing. So it means really paying close attention to those small details because they can really make a big difference to your listener's experience. And of course, if I have said it once, I've said it a million times, consistency is key. And that goes for creating quality content for your podcast as well. So whether you are putting out a podcast on a weekly basis, bi-weekly, monthly, consistency is key there. So make sure that your publishing schedule is consistent and that your content is consistent. That means providing and delivering the same high quality content in every single episode. But consistency really helps to build that listener anticipation and habit. But remember, consistency builds trust with the audience. It shows them you're reliable. It shows them that you're committed to delivering value. And it keeps them engaged and coming back for more, which is what we want to do when we're creating any type of podcast content. Next up is to consider the structuring of your episodes. So the structure of your episodes is really going to impact the quality and engagement. So a well-structured episode is easier to follow and more engaging to listen to. So you want to start out by having a really clear introduction that sets the stage for the episode. So that could be a brief overview of the topic. It could be a summary of what's going to be covered. It could even be a teaser, whatever it is that's going to pull that audience in immediately and is going to be that hook for your podcast. Then you want to move into the body of the podcast. So again, this is where we really dive into the details, the topic. So break the section down into smaller segments or chapters to make it more digestible. And then, of course, you want to wrap it up with a really clear conclusion, unless, of course, your podcast kind of leaves people on a cliffhanger. But this is where you really want to include a summary of any key points that you touched on, a clear call to action, and, of course, a teaser for the next episode. So remember, a well-structured episode not only enhances listener engagement, it improves the experience, and it really makes your podcast more enjoyable and more memorable. Next up is to do your SEO. So search engine optimization, or SEO, is not only for websites. It's a really critical part of your podcast setup. So SEO can help get your podcast discovered by more people. When people search for podcasts, they will typically search for keywords. And these are words or phrases that are related directly to the topic that they're interested in. So you want to make sure you're optimizing your podcast for your keywords. This will increase its visibility in search results. But SEO for podcasts is not just about keywords. It's also about providing valuable, high-quality content. That is really what search engines and podcast directories are looking for when they're ranking podcasts. But when it comes to SEO, you also want to consider optimizing your titles, your descriptions, and your metadata. So the title of your podcast is one of the most important factors for SEO. It's one of the first things that people will see when they find your podcast, and it's also one of the main things that search engines will look at when ranking your podcast. So your podcast title should be clear, concise, and descriptive. It should give potential listeners a good idea of what your podcast is about. And again, use your keywords here. And the description of your podcast is also important for SEO. So it should provide more detail about your podcast and the content. And again, put your keywords in there. And then the metadata, that's another key factor. So that's things like your podcast category, language, the content rating. Make sure that you fill out all of that metadata accurately and completely. Next up is the importance of show notes and transcripts. So show notes and transcripts can really help to boost your podcast's SEO. Again, they provide additional text content that search engines can index, but they also help your podcast show up in search results. And show notes, they're basically just a summary of each episode, but you want to make sure that they include key points, links to any resources that you mention, and contact information or a call to action. So again, plug those keywords throughout your show notes. And show notes are a word for word record of each episode. So instead of trying to create that yourself, there's so many ways you can go about that. You could record your whole podcast and then have it transcribed. And then if you need to clean it up, you can clean it up. And that will save you a ton of time. And you also want to make sure that your podcast is accessible to people who are hard of hearing or even deaf. So just keep those things into consideration when creating your show notes. And again, remember SEO, it's not a one-time task. It's an ongoing process. So you'll want to keep optimizing your podcast for SEO to ensure that you're growing that listener base and your overall audience. Next up is to leverage your social media for podcast promotion. So as we all know, social media is a powerful tool for a lot of different types of promotion, but podcasting definitely. It can help you to reach a larger audience and of course engage with those listeners. And it's a great way to build a community around your podcast. That's why you'll see a lot of people do Facebook groups for their podcast. And different social media platforms have different strengths. Some are better for sharing audio clips, while others are going to be better for sharing images or text. You really want to understand the differences. That will help you choose the right platforms for your podcast marketing. When choosing a social media platform for your podcast, you want to consider that target audience. Where are they spending their time online? What kind of content do they engage with? These are really important questions to ask yourself. If your podcast is about business, then LinkedIn is probably going to be a great platform for you to use. If your podcast is about fashion or lifestyle, Instagram will probably be a really great choice for you. And you also want to consider the type of content that you want to share. If you want to share audio clips of your podcast, then you can use those on Facebook, for example. If you like to create different types of infographics for each podcast episode, that would be great for Pinterest. But remember, you don't have to be on every single platform. It's better to focus on one or two and do them very, very well, and don't spread yourself too thin. It can become very overwhelming. And engaging with your audience on social media is just as important as sharing content. So if you can really build up those relationships with your listeners, they can also provide really valuable feedback to you about your podcast. And there are many great ways to engage with your audience on social media. You can ask questions, respond to comments, start discussions. You can even use user-generated content and really use that to promote your podcast. Another really fun way to engage your audience through social media is contests or giveaway. I say this a lot just because over the years I've seen, what it can do for building that audience. And it's a really fun way to reward your listeners and attract new ones. But again, social media, it's a two-way street, right? It's not just about, sending out your content. It's really about listening to your audience and interacting with them. That can make your podcast so much more successful in the long run. Next up is collaborating and networking. My favorites, right? They can really be key strategies in your podcast marketing. It can help you reach a whole new audience. It can help you build relationships within the podcasting community. And it's a great way to provide fresh content. So there are a ton of different ways that you can collaborate, and you can partner with different podcasters. You could appear as a guest on their podcast, have them on your podcast. You can do different types of podcasting events or join different types of podcast communities. If you're going to partner with other podcasters, that really can be a win-win situation. You can cross-promote each other's content, you can share to your existing audiences, and provide fresh content to your listeners. And again, it really helps to build those potential partnerships in the community. So when choosing podcasters to partner with, you want to look for those who share your audience. So of course, you don't want to be on someone's podcast or have them on your podcast if you're in the same niche. You don't want to be competitive. You're looking for something that would be complementary. So if your podcast is about entrepreneurship, then you might want to partner with a podcast about marketing. And you also want to consider the quality of their podcast. You want to partner with podcasters who provide and create high quality content. This will really enhance your reputation and provide more value to your listeners. But remember, collaboration is a mutual benefit. So make sure that you're providing your value to your partners as well as receiving value from them. And appearing as a guest on podcasts, that can be a really great way to reach new audiences. It can expose you to a larger audience to attract those new listeners. And again, it will provide you with more opportunities down the road. I see this time and time again with clients where I set them up with a podcasting schedule. And then the next thing you know, we have people who listen to the podcast reaching out to see, hey, will you be on my podcast as well? So interviewing guests can really provide a lot of value to your listeners. It can bring fresh perspectives and expertise. And I've been thinking about doing it more and more myself because sometimes it's really hard to just be a talking head or just chatting, by myself. But again, when you are choosing partners, consider their expertise and relevance to your podcast. Consider their audience. Will their audience be interested in your content? Are they going to bring fresh listeners to your podcast? These are really important things to consider. Don't just partner with everyone just to get on a podcast. Next up is to use email marketing for your podcast promotion. So you guys know how much I love email marketing, and I find it to be such a powerful tool for any online business, but it's definitely something that you want to utilize as a podcaster as well. Why? Because it allows you to communicate directly with your listeners where they are all the time in their inbox, and it keeps them engaged with your content. And it can also be a great driver of traffic to your website and increase your podcast downloads. So building and maintaining an email list should really be a priority for every online business or owner. It allows you to keep in touch with those listeners, share updates. You can use it for all different types of email marketing within your business. And again, it's this direct line of communication with your audience. But you want to make sure that you're using email marketing strategies that are really going to maximize the benefits of your content and help you increase your open rates, your click-through rates, your conversion rates, and also, again, build relationships with the people who sign up and nurture them through your amazing, valuable content. And building an email list really starts by offering that value to your listeners. So you could do something like exclusive content, or maybe they get early access to episodes, or maybe they get a free resource related to each podcast. You can promote different types of offers on your podcast, your website, your social media channels, but maintaining that email list really requires regular communication with your subscribers. So you want, again, be consistent here. So whether you're on a weekly podcast schedule, bi-weekly, monthly, each email should go out along with the podcast, and it needs to provide value, keeping them engaged with your podcast. So again, the goal with email marketing, it's not just to promote. It's also to build relationships, to nurture the relationships that you have, and really keep those listeners, audience members engaged with your content. And effective email campaigns really start with understanding the audience again. So keep that in mind as you're creating the content. And of course, track all of your metrics, right? Make sure you're looking at your open rates and click-through rates, conversion rates. Make sure that your podcast emails are being as effective as possible. You can really utilize that data to refine your strategies and improve your results over time. Next up is encouraging reviews and ratings. This can be a really critical role in your podcast marketing. So they not only provide valuable feedback, but it boosts your podcast's visibility. So high ratings and positive reviews will significantly improve your podcast rankings on various platforms. And reviews and ratings can really influence potential listeners. So they will often check the reviews and ratings before deciding whether they're going to invest in listening to a podcast. And podcast reviews can really convince them to, hey, give this podcast a try. So you'll want to encourage your listeners to leave reviews and ratings. That should really be a part of your overall podcast marketing strategy. It will help you to improve your podcast, increase that visibility, and attract those new listeners. And you want to ask for reviews. Don't just assume that if someone's listening to your podcast that they will leave a review. A lot of times you have to kind of encourage that. You want to do it in a way that does not come off as pushy. So here's a few ways to do that I found to be really successful. So you can provide very clear instructions on how to leave a review. So maybe you're sending that to your different partners that you're going to be working with. Hey, can you leave me a review? That can be a great way to build those up. And you can remind your listeners at the end of all of your episodes to leave a review. You can offer different types of incentives if you'd like, but you really want to be genuine. I think that's the most important thing, is to let listeners know how much you value their feedback, and you want their feedback so that you can improve the podcast on your end. And then next up is paid advertising and sponsorships. So they can be a really effective way to promote your podcast, obviously, but they can, again, help you reach that much larger audience and increase visibility. However, they do usually require a financial investment, so you want to make sure that you're utilizing those strategically. That could be doing different types of social media ads or search engine ads, even podcast ads. But you really want to look into that, because each type of ad will have its own advantages and will definitely target different types of audiences. And of course, if you're financially investing in this type of marketing, you want to make sure that you're choosing the right type of ad for your podcast. Whereas sponsorships, on the other hand, involve partnering with another company or brand. So the sponsor provides financial support in exchange for advertising on your podcast. So this can be a really incredible way to monetize your podcast and promote it at the same time. So definitely a win-win. And if you're looking to secure sponsorships, a really great way to do that is to demonstrate the value of your podcast. So you may want to have a podcast media kit. I create these for clients all of the time, where you want to include things that a sponsor would be interested in. So that will be things like your audience size, your engagement rate, and your audience's demographics. It's really important to show how your podcast aligns with the sponsor's brand and values as well. And of course, once you secure a sponsorship, make sure that you fulfill all of your obligations. So this could include mentioning the sponsor in your episodes or promoting the sponsor on social media. There's a lot of different ways that you guys can partner together on that, but whatever you agree to, make sure that you're fulfilling your end of the deal. And then, of course, analytics and feedback, right? I mean, in all marketing, if you're not measuring success, then what are you doing? You really want to understand the performance of your podcast. It helps you to make informed decisions about your content and your overall marketing strategies. So, two key sources to really have it top of mind all the time are your podcast analytics and your listener feedback. Podcast analytics really provide that data that you need to know about your podcast. It will show you how many people are listening, where are they listening from, how are they engaging with the content. Where listener feedback, on the other hand, really provides you with valuable insight. It helps you to understand what your audience likes and dislikes when it comes to your podcast content. So you really want to dig into those things. And another thing that's really important to think about when you're creating podcast content is how can you repurpose it? Because creating a podcast is a lot of work, from planning to recording, editing, promoting. each episode really does require significant time and effort. So you really want to make sure that you're squeezing out as much value as you possibly can from each episode. And that's where repurposing comes in. So you want to take that podcast episode and turn it into as many different types of content that you can. This will help you to reach a wider audience. It'll improve that SEO, and it really provides more and more and more value to your audience and really allows you to extend the longevity of your podcast content. So you may want to turn it into an article or a blog post. You may take the transcript and transform it into some other type of written content. You can really utilize it in so many different ways. When I record my podcast each week, I record it as a podcast and as a video. That way I can take both of those pieces of content and pull them apart. I can use the podcast for different types of audio snippets. I can use the video for different types of video reels, snippets that I want to get out into the world. And it really allows you to really extend that value of the time that you are investing into the podcast itself. Here's this week's homework. I know I gave you a lot of different things to think about and remember when it comes to your podcast marketing. It's really a journey, right? So I try not to ever think about it as, I'm doing this because, I want overnight success, right? It's always thinking about how we can give some wins to our audience and build up a loyal following over time. So anytime I'm creating any type of content, the one thing I'm always thinking to myself is, does this provide value to you guys? That's the most important thing. But it's also about staying patient and persistent, right? Your audience growth is going to take time, and make sure that you're delivering that quality content and engaging content over and over again. So don't be discouraged if you don't see immediate results right out of the gate. Every successful podcaster started with 0 listeners. What sets most of them apart is persistence. They keep creating, they keep promoting, they keep showing up and engaging with their audience over and over and over again. And that's when you're really going to see that growth. And podcast marketing does require continuous improvement and adapting. The podcast landscape is always evolving, just like most online marketing always is. You're going to see new platforms emerge, listeners' behaviors change, and marketing strategies will evolve. So make sure that you're staying on top of any of, latest trends, best practices, and regularly review your podcast analytics and the listener feedback. If you really dig into your analytics right now, you can use those insights to refine your marketing strategy and improve your podcast. I guarantee it. If you've been recording for any period of time, you can go in and you'll see what type of topics are the most popular, and then you can create more content like that or spin off from that type of content. So just be persistent, but be gentle with yourself. Make a commitment. If you're going to do it, do it. You can really grow your audience and achieve all of your podcasting goals by doing so. And of course, if you have any questions about podcasting, either creating one from scratch or refining your strategy that you have for your existing podcast or creating a promotional strategy, let's chat. I would love to help. You're always welcome to schedule a free consultation at jennylyon.com/chat with Jenny. I also have a workbook that will show you how to start a podcast. So whether you have a podcast or you're just starting out, definitely download it, because there may be things in there that you missed or you simply didn't know. And you can grab it at jennylyon.com/podcast. But either way, I really hope that you found all of these tips and strategies helpful. And if you do have any questions, I'm always here. But I'll see you next time on another episode of Digital Marketing Made Simple. See you soon.